Exactly 1 year ago tonight, in Charleston, South Carolina, in a church, 9 people were gunned down and died. Last August 7th, in Barry, Vermont, Laura Sobel, a social worker for the Department of Children and Family Services, was gunned down and died. Less than 1 week ago, in Orlando, 49 people were gunned down and died. I thank our senator, I call him my senator, our Senator Leahy, for filibustering with 50 of his cohorts on behalf of gun reform. Please join me in a moment of silence for the victims of these senseless tragedies. Thank you. I thank you all for coming tonight to the David W. Curtis Awards, and welcome every single one from far and near. I talked to someone tonight who flew in from Paris to be here. And I know there are some people from Hartford, Vermont that are here, and all over, and we welcome you all. On behalf of all Vermont Democrats, I extend a particularly warm welcome to my friend, and you will be your friend, R.T. Ryback, former mayor of Minneapolis and current vice chair of the DNC. I extend I have a very strong charged welcome for our Senator Patrick Leahy, our Congressman Peter Welch, and a huge shout out to Senator Nina Turner from Ohio, on behalf of Bernie Sanders. I also would like to enthusiastically welcome our many candidates and our elected officials who have joined us tonight. A sincere welcome to our delegates who will be representing Vermont in Philadelphia next month at the DNC National Convention. I want to take a moment to thank 2 members of our outgoing Democratic leadership who are with us tonight, Speaker Shap Smith and President Pro Tem John Campbell. And also a thank you to our Governor Peter Shumlin, who is unable to be here tonight. Vermont is a stronger and more inclusive state because of their leadership on key legislative issues: equal marriage, increased opiate addiction treatment, renewable energy, to name just a few. Shap and John, please stand up and be recognized. Now, I know there are a lot of people going to dinner, but those of you that are running for office in November, please stand now and raise your hands and shake them. Thank you very, very much. Our best wishes and gratitude. This is the 17th year we have held this event. Every year we come together to honor those who represent what we as Democrats hold as our core values. The values that David W. Curtis so completely embodied during his life. We come together tonight in celebration of the spirit of giving, giving back to the community, giving a voice to the voiceless, and giving hope to all Vermonters that they are heard and respected as we work together for a brighter future. Because we are Democrats, and that is what it means to be Democrats. Our award recipients this year understand this better than many. They have worked to protect the needs and interests of vulnerable communities, fought to better the lives of all Vermonters with equality and justice. Tonight we honor Vermont State Treasurer Beth Pierce. Former Vermont NEA Executive Director Joel Cook. And Representative and Vice Chair of the Vermont Democratic Party, Tim German. We are proud to highlight their accomplishments and values as a reminder of what we stand for and strive for as a party. There are challenges and work to be done to secure Democratic victories in November. Together, we will stand behind those who fight for all of us, who are passionately committed in helping those in need, who recognize the hope and potential of future generations, who believe we must and can improve the ways we use our planet's resources, who aim to break down walls and move us forward. So again, I thank you for being here for the Curtis Awards dinner, at the Curtis Awards dinner, where we come together as Vermonters and Democrats. I now would like to invite up John Campbell, who's a very happy man right now, and he will make his introductions.
Hi, folks. First of all, I really would like to have everyone give a big hand to Dottie Deans, who has done so much for the Democratic Party in the state of Vermont. She's one of those individuals who never looks for credit or never asks for it, but she certainly deserves it. And Dottie, I can tell you, the state of Vermont's Democratic Party would not be as rich as it is, and I mean rich in so many ways, if it had not been for you. So thank you. It's my honor right now to introduce one of my mentors, a good friend that I've known since before I ran in 2000. And after that, Peter Welch came on and ran when we had another vacancy in the Senate. He was an incredible person who rose very quickly to being elected pro tem. And during his time, he was able to teach many of us who had not been in the Senate for long, teach us certain things that he has that he carries forward today in Washington. And that is that he is a listener. He taught us to listen. He taught us to respect. He taught us that other people's opinions mattered, even if you didn't agree with them. Peter is the type of leader and the type of public servant that we need more of in Washington. When people talk about working together and working across aisles and working collaboratively to make things better, that's one of the things that Peter's dedicated his life to do, not only here in Vermont, but also in Washington. So right now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce my friend and my congressman, Peter Welch.
Thank you very much. It's tremendous to be here at the Curtis dinner. I want to be brief, and I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about the Democratic Party in Vermont that I love. I want to talk about Orlando, and I want to talk about guns. Who would think that when this country needed someone to shake it up, it would be some Vermont Democrat? Think back. When Democrats needed a representative of the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, when the candidates for president were not talking about how wrong it was for us to have gone into Iraq, and a Burlington Democrat, Howard Dean, stood up and changed the whole course of the Democratic opposition to the war. And Howard Dean, thank you. In this year, when we have seen the enormous challenges that everyday Americans face, when we've had all of the wealth distribution go to the 1%, with folks who've had jobs for the past 20 years, they haven't seen a raise. And one person, more than anyone else in this country, stood up and said the 99% matter. He's had an incredible impact on the Democratic platform, what we believe in, and how we're going to get back to our roots to help make Democrats build an economy that works for everyone. Thank you, Bernie Sanders. And we are going to take that message. All of us Democrats, from our presidential nominee to our gubernatorial candidate to every person running for the House, and we're going to say we're going to make this economy work for everyone. Now, I want to talk about Orlando. Dottie Dean's raised that. I mean, there's not much that any of us can say. The heartache for those families. You know, the people who are in this club going to a safe place where they could be themselves, they could enjoy each other's company, they could have some relief from a hard week of work, and then to be mowed down, slaughtered, 49 people dead. You know, one of them, we've read about their biographies, and it just makes your heart sick. But one stood out to me, Brenda Lee McCool, 49 years old. She's a mother of 11, a grandmother of 6. She was there dancing with her son, Isaiah. When she saw the shooter, she jumped in front of her son to take the bullets. And this mother of 11, grandmother of 6, died, saving her son's life. And she was at a place where she had every legitimate expectation that she would be safe. You know, the person who was there doing the shooting, he had a Sig Sauer semi-automatic, just about automatic weapon. It's used on the battlefield. They just took back Fallujah. Guns like that and the AK-47 were used. It's the right place for it. Is it right place on the dance hall? Just think, here's the advertising for this to be marketed that can be purchased by anybody. It's an innovative weapon system. It's a weapon system being brought into a dance hall. Even while in the field, you configure the SIG MCX as needs and conditions change. So I guess as the music changes, you can adapt this to the musical rhythm. This gun had no place to be in a dance hall. And you know, when we returned to Congress, that happened on the weekend, and we got back in the House on Monday. And it has been the custom in the House when there has been a gun violence incident to have a moment of silence, much like Dottie had a moment of silence here today. And it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate, to show our respect. It's a gesture. It's a legitimate gesture. But you know what? I did something that I never, ever thought I would do. I walked out. Because was it, you know, I'll tell you why I did. Since Newtown, it's about 3 years ago, we've had over 30 moments of silence for mass shooting incidents. Since Newtown, there have been over 1,000 mass casualties. And what I saw happening in the House of Representatives, after yet another, the largest mass casualty shooting that we've had, was the House doing what it's done in the past, having a moment of silence followed by absolute, complete inaction. Nothing, nothing, nothing. And it made me ask the question, was this really a moment of silence out of respect, or was it a moment of shame, reflecting on the failure of the House of Representatives to even debate a bill about gun violence? And you know what? It's time. It's time. We have in the House we can't even bring up a bill that would prohibit people who are identified as suspected terrorists and are on the list prohibiting them from getting on a plane. They have a right to buy one of these automatic weapons. And we can't even have an opportunity on the House floor to debate that, let alone have a debate about this question of the legality of carrying around an automatic weapon and bringing it into a dance hall. And you know, this is happening in an environment where people are self-radicalizing. So there is an enormous threat to public safety. And the question I ask is the question I know so many of you have been asking for a long time. Isn't it possible somehow that we can reconcile the legitimate Second Amendment rights of law-abiding people who like to hunt, who like to target shoot, who like to collect and protect the safety of that mom who had to give her life to save her son? Isn't it time? I just want to read you some comments that my colleague Pete Aguilar, the representative at San Bernardino, the mass shooting just before. He said, you know, after the House moment of silence, he said, thoughts and prayers are nice, but they don't stop a suspected terrorist from getting a firearm. Thoughts and prayers are nice, but they don't perform comprehensive background checks on domestic abusers or convicted felons who still want to kill. And thoughts and prayers are nice, but they don't stop rounds of bullets from thundering out of an assault weapon and inflicting mass casualties on innocent Americans. You know, these are challenging times. And I really don't want to talk about Donald Trump. We all know how bad he is. And we really do. And the reason I don't want to is that, all right, there's not much to say about how bad he is. He does it for us every day. He's good at it. What we have to remember is, what is this Democratic Party about? This Democratic Party is about that assertion that Bernie Sanders made so forthrightly in this campaign, that if somebody in some family works hard, they work hard in a grocery store, they work hard in a retail establishment, they work hard as a daycare worker, that person, that family should have reasonable confidence that if one of them gets sick, they're going to have health care. They should have confidence that if they have to care for a loved one or a parent and they can get family leave and not be fired because they have to take a few days off. They should have some confidence that when they come to retire after a life of work, they can have some reasonable security. And I'm for a Democratic Party that when times are tough and we have these terribly difficult questions, we don't ignore them. And this question of gun violence is now an issue that the Democratic Party has to embrace. We have to work through this, and we have to protect the people like that mom who lost her life protecting her son. That's the Democratic Party that we are. It's the Democratic Party that I love. It's the Democratic Party that's been my life's work. And I thank you all for being here so that we can go together and make progress for the American people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Welch. Hey, I love having dinner with Democrats. We start late, we don't listen, we argue, and somehow we figure it out in the end. We are the Vermont Democratic Party. And for that, let's give a big Democratic shout of thanks to Dottie Deans. Dottie, thank you. And Dottie, as the Irish would say, it's a nice night for an evening. Thank you for bringing us together. My name's TJ Donovan, and I'm running for Attorney General. I want to thank Senator Sanders for raising the issue of inequality that exists not only in this state but across these United States. He has changed the conversation, and we are a better state and nation for it. But as the senator said, more work needs to be done. And that is true in the criminal justice system where inequality and unfairness reign, particularly when we talk about women who are victims of assaults. If we truly want to level the playing field for women, prosecutors, elected officials, community members must acknowledge that trauma, poverty, and power are dynamics in the continued marginalization of women. And I'm proud to introduce the next speaker who has been a champion for women, who has been a champion for victims, who has been a champion for the poor, for the dispossessed, for all Vermonters, for the Vermonters, as Peter Welch said, who get up every day, work hard, play by the rules, and expect government to work for them. That is Senator Patrick J. Leahy. And he did it again when he held the floor with the other Senate Democrats to bring a vote on sensible gun laws in this nation. He's done it for 40 years. We need him for 6 more. He's fought for us. Time to fight for Senator Leahy.
TJ, thank you so much. I look back on my days when I was state's attorney of Chittenden County. I thought I did a good job, and then I realized TJ Donovan is the man who's set the standards, and think what he will do for our state as Attorney General. Thank you. And TJ, thank you for talking about the things that a lot of times we don't want to talk about. The violence against women. Marcel and I have gone to so many shelters for women, not only here, but Mr. Mayor in Minnesota 2 weeks ago and elsewhere. When I decided a few years ago that even the Violence Against Women Act, which was a good start, went nowhere near enough. I talked with you, TJ, I talked with other prosecutors around the country, and we expanded it to include the LGBT community, to include Native Americans. And when many on the other side tried to stop me from passing that, I reminded them of the days when, like TJ, I was Chittenden County State's Attorney. And I'd go at 3 o'clock in the morning to crime scenes and to see a woman who'd been beaten to death. I never remembered the police ever saying, well, we can't get involved in this unless we make sure the woman is straight and not gay, the woman is not a Native American. No, a victim is a victim is a victim. And TJ, you've always taken that attitude. And Dottie, thank you and Peter for speaking about the recent tragedy, terrible tragedy. And let me praise another senator, Chris Murphy of Connecticut. We had long discussion. I rarely ever talk about what goes on in a Senate caucus, but Cory Booker, Chris Murphy, and I talked in that caucus about this gun violence. We talked about the three major pieces of gun legislation that I had passed through the Senate 3 years ago, and they were then filibustered by the Republicans and stopped, and how we have to try again. Chris Murphy galvanized that by going on the floor and standing hour after hour. I was proud to be one of the New Englanders who stood with him and helped speak and give him a chance to catch his breath and fill in and speak when he was pausing. We did this, and then we were joined not only from those of us from New England who were there, but we were joined by other senators from around the country. And I think the American people listened. I know from what Marcel and I heard as we walked down the street, every place here in Vermont, Vermonters listen, and thank you for listening. We can do it. We passed it through the Senate before, we'll do it again. And this time, even though we're in the minority, I hope that enough people have conscience and stand up. The United States Senate should be the conscience of the nation. It often isn't. Now is a time I call on all 100 senators. Be the conscience of the nation. We can do it. Now, my dear friend from the House said he won't talk about Trump. Hell, I'm going to talk about Trump. I looked at our two possible candidates, Senator Sanders and Secretary Clinton. I thought, man, what a clear difference between them and what they stand for and what Donald Trump stands for. Here is a person, I don't know if he's ever read the Constitution, but I have. He would limit the freedom of speech. Seriously. One of the things that has allowed diversity in this country, freedom of speech, he would limit it. He would change the libel laws. He said so. He's already blocking media from his events because they dare to disagree with him. Now, but it goes further than that. He said he would change the rules so our military could go in and execute the families of those suspected of being terrorists. Are you serious? Are you serious? This is not somebody running to be the leader of ISIS. He wants to be the leader of this country. It is unbelievable. He said he'd build a wall. Well, I kind of like that idea. I wonder how my Italian grandparents would have come to this country in 1890 if that wall had been there saying, oh, wait a minute, you speak a different language. You have a different religion than the majority of us. We can't allow you in. Instead, they came to Vermont and established a business and raised my mother and her siblings, sent a war hero to World War II, and saw their grandson run for the United States Senate. That is the difference between what we stand for and what Donald Trump does. And one of the worst things is he said he would establish a religious test. Oh my God. What democracy could ever do that? And think of those in history who have done that. Let me read you an email, Marcel, if I might. This came from a dear friend of ours right after the shooting. She and her husband are both noted physicians who came here from another country. And she said, "Dear Marcel, I spent pretty much the whole day yesterday in a depressed state pondering and praying for the innocent people who lost their lives in Orlando. Since it is Ramadan, the month of fasting and praying for we Muslims, I prayed for the departed souls and for peace and tolerance in the world, which seems to be lacking in these cruel and treacherous times. My heart is so sorrowful. I pray for everyone's safety, and they will come out of this tragedy stronger and resilient and united as a nation. And our best wishes to you and Patrick and the family." This was the prayer of a devout Muslim for all of us. We cannot ever accept the idea of religious tests in our country. And I'll finish with this. I know what they want to do in the Senate. Mitch McConnell, who announced an hour after they found Justice Scalia's body that we will not fulfill our constitutional obligation, and did not want the president to fulfill his constitutional obligation to nominate someone to the Supreme Court and for us to do our job to advise and consent. This has never happened in this country before, but he could do it because he had a majority of Republicans who would stand with him. They want very much, they're looking at the Vermont seat. They're looking at Vermont, it's one Senate seat. All he needs is one to be able to do that. I'm not going to let them have this Senate seat. Now, I'm not going to let them cut funding for Zika research, for medical research, for nutrition. We're not going to allow that. I'm not going to give in to them. Vermont is mine and Marcel's home. We love it. We love serving it. We think of this afternoon when we were with young children in Milton, Vermont, who are in the summer feeding program, something that I wrote and something that they are encouraged by. And I'm thinking here in the wealthiest, most nation on earth where hunger is morally wrong, these children were being fed, they were happy, they were enjoyable. We want to just pick them all up and take them home. But it showed last night when I was with young entrepreneurs who have gotten funds that I've brought here to Vermont, but the jobs they created so we can have decent jobs and people can afford to be here. How important that is. The money been able to get for education and research. These are all things I've been able to do in Vermont and will continue to do. But I'll close with just one last thing that involves Vermonters. On a Sunday morning, Marcel and I went down and talked to a group of little leaguers. They were so excited. We gave them an American flag. They were about to get on a bus and go to Montreal and fly to Cuba, where they were going to play with little leaguers from Cuba, something that could not have been done before the effort that many of us did to reopen to Cuba. And the smiles on their face, and I'll always treasure the pictures they sent back to us, standing with that American flag next to the other players with the Cuban flag, and lastly, a picture the woman in my office took, and with her arm, with two boys from the back, one in the red shirt of the Cuban players, one in the blue shirt of the American, walking arm in arm. And I think, Carolyn, I've shown you that picture. This was an example of what can happen when people show openness to other countries, not walls. Thank you. And now, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now, one of the reasons I'm fortunate to have Carolyn Dwyer and John Tracy to tell me what to do, they reminded me, I want to introduce Shap Smith, who has served so well as the Speaker of the House. Shap, where? Right here. Come on up here.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. It is a true honor to be here tonight to introduce Chris Curtis. Chris, I forgot my notes, so I'm going to do it off the fly. Chris and I have gotten to know each other well in my 14 years in the legislature. And let me just say that I drive down to the State House every morning, and my parking spot is right where you enter to come into the State House, on the right side of the State House. And there are people who use that opportunity, because they know when I'm getting out of my car, to put in a plug about what they might be interested in having done in the House. And I will admit to, on occasion, pretend that I am on the phone to avoid those plugs. But I don't do that with Chris. There are some people who come to you and they're sort of righteous and angry, and at 7:30 in the morning, I'm just not ready for that. I've had enough of that, getting my kids out of bed. But Chris always approaches things with a smile and with a desire to make Vermont a better place for all Vermonters. And you know, many of us, actually all of us, sometimes forget why we're doing this work. But Chris does not. Chris remembers the people who are struggling. He understands their stories. He understands the power of government and how we can make their lives better. He is an apple that has not fallen far from the tree. One of the things that I'm going to miss being Speaker of the House is Chris standing outside my doorway, waiting, and waiting, and waiting, and not going away. Because he knew that if he got to speak to me or a member of leadership, he might have an opportunity to change things for one person or two persons' lives. And that makes all the difference in the world. So it is my great honor tonight to welcome and introduce Chris Curtis, somebody I call a good friend and somebody who makes a difference for everybody in this state. Chris, come up to the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that very gracious introduction. I'm sure there will be a mixture of relief that I won't be darkening your door. Maybe. But I learned very early on about that care and compassion from my dad. And that's the opportunity that I have every year at this event. And it's my favorite part of the year to come to this event and be able to reminisce or share a reminiscence about David Curtis, because he really taught me what it means to make a difference, to take the time to get to know people, meet them where they're at, suspend judgment, and try to act in furtherance of a larger good. And he did that not necessarily through politics, but he did it by practicing law, by representing individuals, and by trying to change systems and wielding what influence he had to affect those systems. And tonight, I have to tell you, I've been thinking about him a great deal this week because he assumed the leadership of this party at a time as he was living openly as a gay man in Vermont, taking a leadership position in the state, someone living with HIV and AIDS and struggling with that disease. And he refused to let that deter him from having an impact. And the story I want to share with you tonight is about him. It's also about his grandson. I went to the vigil in the march in Burlington to remember the victims of Orlando. And all of the Vermonters who had come to that event assembled at the top of Church Street. And for those of you who knew my dad, he was really a fixture of Church Street. He spent a lot of time talking to his friends, meeting people, talking to clients, and spending time on that street. His funeral was held in the church at the top of Church Street. And I brought my son, Will, for whom he is named. It's his middle name. And as we were looking at all of our friends and community members that were part of the vigil, I was thinking to myself, he must be here somewhere. He must be here somewhere. And my son, Will, had a lot of questions about what was happening because he's old enough to have heard the news and to hear the radio. And he asked a lot of questions about why somebody would do this kind of a thing. And I had to tell him that this was an attack on people like his grandfather and like his grandmother. And he said, I'm so glad that they weren't there. And I said, me too, sweetie. Me too. So it's very personal to me, and I think to my family, to endure this tragedy along with every other Vermonter, every other American. And it seems like this is becoming almost a routine occurrence in this country. Because last year, we were here marking a different tragedy, another act of gun violence. And here we find ourselves again. I didn't come tonight with any prepared remarks. I usually labor over those because I want to take great care and time in remembering my dad. Tonight, I just wanted to speak to you from the heart, share that story with you. And while I didn't have any prepared remarks, I am prepared to stand up against all forms of discrimination in this state and in this country, as I know all of you are. I am prepared to stand up against gun violence in this country, as I know all of you are. And I think what I'd like to do is a brief exercise in the power of this room, because if I'm willing to stand up for those things, and I know you're willing to stand up for them, I want to see you all stand up right now in solidarity, and look around the room, because we can harness the power that's in this room, and we can make the change that we want to make with respect to gun violence, with respect to discrimination in all of its forms, and with respect to social and economic justice. And now we have to get to work. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here and for celebrating this night tonight. I have the great honor and privilege of working regularly with Martha Allen, and not just in her capacity as an educator or as president of Vermont NEA, but in her capacity as a member of the Governor's Council on Pathways from Poverty. And Martha is one of those people that has dedicated herself to solving the issue of poverty and thinking about it through the lens of public education and what educators can do to help stem the tide of poverty in this state. So thank you, Martha Allen. Please join me up here on the stage. I know you have an introduction to make. Thank you.
Ooh, change your thinking. That was something special, Christopher. Thank you very much. Yeah. Before he got up here, I was thinking about this whole evening, and I looked at these banners. And several years ago, when Vermont NEA still had a convention, I had the great honor of standing with Senators Leahy and Sanders and Congressman Welch right behind me before I gave my remarks and to introduce them, and it was one of the proudest moments of my life. And there they are, and there they are. So thank you to our guys in DC, because it makes me so proud to be a Vermonter. You guys are amazing. But that's not why I'm up here. I'm up here to introduce the next speaker and the first recipient of a Curtis Award. So I'm, as you heard, I'm the president of Vermont NEA, and I guess that qualifies me for this introduction of Joel Cook. I was told to say good things about him, but keep my remarks short, so that works out perfectly. But seriously, I've had the pleasure of working with Joel for the past 7 years, closely, and his dedication to public school employees, most of whom are Vermont NEA members, has never faltered. And I know that many of the statutes in the, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Vermont Education Law Book. It's this really thick green thing with size 2 font, and it goes on and on and on. Anyway, his fingerprints are all over that book. He has written a whole lot of that, and that's a good thing. And some might say his work ethic is stellar, but others might contend that he's just plain crazy. And he'll leave the office in the end of the day, and 1 hour later, I'll get an email. It'll be from him. He will have driven home and right onto the computer, and just ask Chris, his wife, and I'm sure that more than once you have wanted to disable that computer permanently. I'm just guessing, but I don't know. Anyway, he's a prolific writer. If you don't know that already, you may have received something from him over the years. He will produce multiple pages on multiple issues on a regular basis. He has great difficulty when asked to write a one-pager with bullet points, which we try a lot to get him to do. So regardless of which position he's held over the years, he has devoted countless hours to those he has represented. His dedication to his work is unprecedented. Joel's career has spanned many, 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 many decades. I can't begin to count them. But during those years, he's always remained a champion of the most vulnerable Vermonters, and that's why he's receiving this award this evening. Before he came to Vermont NEA, he had advocated for Vermonters who had no voice, no power, no vehicle through which to express themselves. He spent his career lifting up Vermonters of all ages who needed a boost, and for this, we are grateful. As far as speeches and awards are concerned, there must be a Seinfeld episode for this, but I'll leave that one to Joel. It's my honor to introduce Joel Cook.
Thank you all very much. This is where I get to say thank you to Martha, I think. And I mean that in multiple ways. You know, I have a little bit of a script here that I'm going to follow because otherwise I'll drone on. I'm not here to give political speech. I'm here to express my gratitude to you, and I will get to that. But I just have to say that this week has been so hard for everybody in this room and perhaps all over the nation and beyond. And it feels so good to be in a place where we know that our leaders are with us. And I just have to express appreciation, not just to everybody here, but to the folks who came before me and who were able to express so eloquently what so many of us have been thinking. So thank you guys very much. All right, so now I'm going to wax between cracking wise and a bit of seriousness. But I have to set the record straight to begin with. There's a picture of me, which is, as pictures go of me, not bad at all. But it's accompanied by the printed word associated with my having retired last December. And those who laughed know that I'm under the impression that I have not yet retired. So, as usual, I'm either the last one to know, or the announcement, in fact, is incorrect, and as I have thought, I'll be retiring at the end of this December and not last December. And so perhaps I'm here a year early, and I'm available to return if you'd like. And ultimately, it all comes down to explaining to me a bit why it is that so many legislators have been looking at me so strangely this year and appearing to pay even less attention to me than they usually do. So having set the record straight, I will now turn a little bit serious here. I really do want to express my truly profound gratitude for this honor. When Connor informed me about it, there were two people just after my family who came immediately to mind, two real capital D Democrats. Sally Fox and I, actually along with Michael, began lobbying in the same era long ago within the Vermont legal aid family. My first pursuit was alongside Sally as we sought to add to and amend the abuse law regarding older Vermonters and to add to it, to extend its reach to adults with disabilities. Sally was representing the latter and I was representing the former, and so I thought immediately of Sally because of your having awarded the same honor to her just 2 years ago, and I really am in such good company. The other person is the one I've always referred to as my governor, ever since she gave me the chance to work for her in 1985, Madeline Kunin. And since I haven't seen her, I think she's not here, but that won't stop me from expressing my gratitude to her. We actually share a birthday, but I think it's the better part of discretion for me not to divulge the difference in our ages. We've crossed paths so many times over the years, and I know that she's paid at least some attention to what I've been up to since then, because she would always tell me on multiple occasions to keep fighting the good fight. Then, of course, there are the other folks being awarded this evening, and in whose good company I also now stand. Tim and I go back to the start of his legislative time early this century. His once and future... We are in the 21st century. It's not that long ago. Yeah. His once and future committee assignment was the Education Committee. And as many of you know, he's unflappable. And I know that because despite my best efforts to rile him, he was indeed unflappable. He's a low-key kind of guy in his work. He gets things done, and he too is involved in the good fight for an array of issues for Vermonters generally and for the party. On my way into the hall this evening, I crossed paths with Teresa, and it occurred to me, guys, that I was there at the beginning and probably knew each of you maybe an instant before you knew each other. Beth and I go back to the start of her time as Jeb's deputy. Many of you know the saga around fully funding the state teachers' retirement system. Jeb was certainly good at this, but until Beth arrived on the scene, no one was sufficiently effective in explaining to, and more to the point, convincing others that it is only in everyone's interest, and not just teachers, to set the teachers' retirement system back on track year in and year out. And the proof is in the pudding. I think this is the 10th consecutive year that Governor Shumlin and his predecessor even, along with both houses, have done what amounts to Jeb's and Beth's convincing bidding. My appreciation for this extends to a lot of other people, but I'm really ticked at the people I work with. Our general counsel at Vermont NEA, Jeff Fannin, which is cheering I would normally go along with, is the labor representative to the party's executive committee. And Martha, who just introduced me in the only way we know how to relate to each other, and which I really do appreciate, is one of our delegates to the Democratic National Convention. And they both knew about this, and they kept it to themselves. And so, as usual, I'm left wondering what else they're keeping from me. But that's fine. They'll never tell. And they'll never tell, I know. And that's fine, too. Okay, so here's, I've hardly ever had a chance like this to speak to so large a captive audience, so settle in. Cheap joke, I didn't mean it, but I do have one event that I want to describe to you, and then I'll sit down, really. I was listening on my commute one day to talk radio, and a representative of one of our business groups was talking about a bill, and after listing an array of employer entities that support the bill, said, the only ones opposing this bill are the labor unions. And there's nothing wrong with her doing her job, and nothing unusual about almost all employer groups signing on to a piece of legislation. But what struck me was how succinctly she made the case for the work I've been doing and the work our unions do every day. She was right about the only voice just plain workers have, whether they're organized or not, is the labor unions. It's what we do. And if we didn't do what we do, working people would really be hard-pressed to get their interests expressed in any organized way in the halls of government. Since my days with Vermont Legal Aid and in my governor's administration, I've had the privilege of directing our state's largest labor union and of having a hand in the larger coalition of unions statewide, fighting, as my governor had it, the good fight. So when I do retire at the end of this year and move on to more things family, I'll miss the work greatly. In the meantime, I can only say one more heartfelt thank you to you all for this, and so thank you.
So I was given this sheet of paper before approaching the podium. It's not just a ploy to get you out of here before I speak, but I've been told to announce that the silent auction will be closing in a couple minutes. This is your last chance to get the Steve Amos buttons of the year, so go ahead out and get them. I'm here tonight to introduce my friend, Tim German. Tim is my neighbor in the village of Essex Junction. He serves as one of our state representatives, and he's completing his 6th and final term in the House. Tim's a real friend. When we moved to town, he was there at our doorstep, brought us coffee and a care package. He's a good guy. Earlier this year, when Tim announced he wouldn't seek re-election, I was honored when he asked me to run for his seat. As I thought through the decision with my wife Candace and our friends and family, we began to take stock of everything that Tim German does. He does a lot for the community, he does a lot for the state, he does a lot for the Vermont Democratic Party. Because beyond the limits of Essex Junction, Tim has lived a life that any Democratic activist would be proud of. He leaves big shoes to fill. Many of us know Tim as the vice chair of the Vermont Democratic Party, where he shows up to events all around the state. Some of us know Tim as the Speaker's right-hand man, where he counts votes and makes sure that the policies that matter to Democrats make it through the process. Then there's a lot of us who know Tim for just being an outstanding volunteer, because Tim always shows up. He's the vice chair of the Vermont State College's Board of Trustees. He's a former 3-term municipal elected official, and Tim was also the Justice of the Peace at my wedding. You see, Tim German is always the first to volunteer. He does so with a blend of wit and humor, and he's always got a smile on his face. His dedication never wavers. He's ever present. He drives the conversation with a commitment to getting people the facts, and he does it with a joy. You know, I jokingly call Tim the happy warrior of Essex Junction, and that's an Al Smith and Hubert Humphrey reference for the older Democrats here. But of course, Tim is much more than that. For those of us who know Tim best and watch the effort he puts forth every day, Tim German is an inspiration. Tim always shows up. That matters. And when he asked me to run, it was an honor. So look, I want to introduce to you the best state representative we have, your vice chair of the Vermont Democratic Party and my good friend, Representative Tim German, the happy warrior of Essex Junction. All right.
I say ring out the old and bring in the new. Huh? Dylan's running, we have a 2-person district in Essex Junction, and Lori Houghton's here. I'm going to have Lori stand up too, because she's running with Dylan, and she's going to be fantastic. So, I'll try to stay happy and brief. I am very honored to receive this award, particularly with my great friends Joel and Beth. I am one of those guys who love to ignore Joel whenever he came in the room. You know. The former award winners list for Curtis is a who's who of the giants who have come before me in service to party and state. For me, in my 12 years in the House, I particularly want to thank the fantastic speakers I served under. Gay Symington and Shap Smith. And the one who paved the way for their success, Michael Obahowski. All of the great moments of achievement that I was part of in the Vermont House were under their amazing leadership. And a shout out to my great committee chairs too, whose accomplishments would take hours to detail. George Cross, yes, that George Cross. Donna Swaney, the great leader for so long of the Government Operations Committee. David Sharp, who is a true champion of Vermont's children and getting a better education. And for 6 years, my great friend and mentor, and the architect of the 12-hour special veto session happy ending, Tony Klein. Where's Tony? And lastly, thank you to my seatmate for 6 years from Essex Junction, a woman of incredible courage, Linda Wade Simpson. And of course, to my wife Teresa and son Trevor, who make sure every day that I am considering all sides of every issue on a daily basis. These are truly exciting times full of change. As your vice chair, I've seen and heard the voices for whom our party's traditional message is not resonating. For those of us with a few gray hairs or no gray hair at all, it's time to expand our thinking, give meaningful voice to those who are really struggling in this economy. Let's make it a joyful and meaningful journey as we all go out to elect Democrats up and down the ticket. And let us be open to the newly energized voters that have embraced the positive message of our own Bernie Sanders. Thank you for this wonderful recognition, which is truly shared by our wonderful VDP staff. And I'm not just saying this. We have the best Democratic staff in the United States. And tonight I'm a very proud Vermonter and a very proud Democrat. And because I've been mercifully brief, like everybody else before me, I'm going to go off script a little bit, just for a moment to express my sorrow and anger that we can live in a country where mass extinction of our fellow brothers and sisters by single individuals with military assault weapons is allowed. If the federal government, and I know that our delegation will work so hard, but if the Republican majority in the House cannot act and is paralyzed, we can. As a member of your state platform committee, I'll be meeting in August with other dedicated Democrats, and I can promise you the issue of wanton firearm violence and ease of access to weapons, which have nothing to do with hunting or the Second Amendment in Vermont, will be high on our agenda. It is time. Thank you, Mike Antochka. I see he's been a champion of this too. So, thank you again. This is a wonderful honor to be up here with my great good friends, Beth and Joel. I'm truly moved, and I thank you very much.
Good evening, Democrats. I'm State Senator Becca Balint from Windham County. Thank you. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce our next award recipient, Treasurer Beth Pierce. I serve on Senate institutions, and I get to interact with Treasurer Pierce quite a bit. I can honestly say I do not think there is anyone else in state government who loves her job as much as our treasurer. It is delightful to watch Beth Pierce get fired up about general obligation bond ratings, affordable debt practices, prudent management of pension systems, and of course, responsible use of reserves. I tell you, she makes it sound fascinating. We all know that Beth Pierce has 40 years experience in government finance, and she's been an exceptional treasurer for the state of Vermont. But you may not know that she's won numerous awards. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns gave her the 2013 Town Government Award for her exceptional awareness of local issues. And in 2015, she received the President's Award for National Leadership from the National Association of State Auditors, Comptrollers, and Treasurers. And although these accolades are well received, and well-deserved, and speak to her commitment to excellence. There is something else that we want to recognize her for tonight. Beth Pierce constantly looks out for the little guys. And this extends to her commitment to local committees and candidates. Beth Pierce seems to be everywhere, all the time, supporting local Democratic committees and their candidates because she believes in this party. And she works hard, very, very hard to make us successful so that we can continue to make life better for all Vermonters. Ladies and gentlemen, Beth Pierce.
I'm going to pull that down. I'm a little shorter than some of the other folks, not Becca though. But, you know, Becca's I was going to say she's a rising star, but she actually, her star has already risen and she's arrived. She's done a fantastic job. Give her a hand. Thank you very much thank you for all you do. And I actually do think that talking about reserves and actuarial funding is very exciting. And if anybody wants to have a conversation about that when we're finished, I'd be very happy to spend a couple hours with you on that subject. So, you know, I'm going to say this, you know, no disrespect to the candidates for governor and the candidates for lieutenant governor and my fellow state officers. The treasurer's job is the best job in the state of Vermont. And I have also the best staff in the state of Vermont. The governor's not here hearing that, right? Okay, so. But I want to introduce a couple of folks over here, past, present, and future, that have been part of that effort. And so I'm going to embarrass them a little bit. I've had the honor of working with a number of people. When I first became treasurer, I asked Steve Wozlowski to be my deputy treasurer. Put your hand up, Steve. Come on. Now, Jeb Spalding was smart enough to grab him to be the CFO of the state college system, but he's done a great job, and frankly, I think he's a bigger geek at institutions committee than I was in terms of he can talk about bond premium for about 3 hours if you want to do that. So, and I've been really blessed to bring on a new deputy treasurer. He's not here today, but his family is here. Michael Clausen, former deputy secretary of administration, has joined our team. And I've got a fantastic policy director over there. Raise your hand, Tim. Okay. And Dylan Giambattista has done a fantastic job for us, and I just want to say thank you for all the work you've done for here and over at the House. You've done a great job. I also want to say thank you and congratulations to both Tim and Joel. I forgot to bring a bottle of V8 with me today. Every meeting I've had with Joel Cook since I become treasurer, I've had a bottle of V8 in the room. The first time he drank it, and I think after that, I don't know if he even likes it, but he keeps drinking it in the office. So I've had a bottle of V8 at every meeting. So there's one. They don't have any at the bar, so I can't do anything about it tonight, but we will get you that V8. But he has been a fantastic, fantastic advocate for unions and the rights of teachers and the rights of folks, working people across this state. And he has shaped the conversation, and he's done incredible work, and I want to thank him and Martha. It's been a pleasure to work with you both. Tim, you're fantastic. We really, on both ends, in terms of both the work you've done at the House and the work you've done for the Democratic Party, I just want to say thank you very much for your leadership. You are everywhere. Every time I go someplace, you're there, and you just do a fantastic job for the state and for Vermonters as a whole. So let's give Tim a hand, too. And I want to acknowledge two people that aren't here today that had a role in bringing me to the treasurer's office. I've been working not quite 40 years. It's been 39 and a half, so to speak. But I'm very precise with numbers. But But there are two people that are very responsible for bringing me to Vermont and getting me into the role as your state treasurer. I came here as a deputy treasurer, so I actually think the deputy treasurer is a pretty good job too, guys, over there, so thank you. But Jeb Spalding, who brought me here to serve as his deputy, and it really was his vision about the office that excited me to take the job. I had a couple of other options I was looking at, so I took the job that paid the least because I wanted to come to Vermont and I wanted to work for a person with integrity like Jeb, and I've never looked back. It's been wonderful. And the other is Governor Shumlin. Governor Shumlin appointed me when there was a vacancy when Jeb moved over to be his Secretary of Administration. So the governor always said, you know, I won with one vote, his vote, and I want to say thank you, Governor, for that. And thank you all since then for helping me get elected and re-elected, because that one vote was great from the beginning, but we wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the help of every single person in this room. You're talking about a political neophyte here, and you helped me figure this out. You helped me with all the support, knocking on the doors, doing the phones, doing all the hard work. So again, thank you, all of you, for all what you've done. Thank you. I also have to say, I just need to say that Chris, I just want to say thank you very much for your leadership and the legacy, your family legacy, and it's an incredible legacy that your family has had in Vermont, and young Will, understanding that legacy at such an early age, that's what makes Vermont special. When we take those Vermont values and we pass them on from generation to generation and work through the issues to make this a better country and to make this a great state. So thank you very much. The treasurer's office, you know, I am going to talk a little, usually when I'm going to say 3 words, you hear me say AAA bond rating, and you say, okay, enough on that. It is about financial. We do need to pay attention to our finances and the bottom line. But that bottom line and how we manage that bottom line is what separates us from some of the other states. And it's something that's extraordinarily important to Vermonters. The bottom line is that managing that bottom line means that we need to recognize that all individuals are part of the prosperity of Vermont. It should not be discrimination. There should not be economic discrimination. There should be economic prosperity for every single citizen. Everybody in Vermont is entitled to dignity and financial independence and the ability to have a lifetime of financial well-being. And that's what makes us special in this state. We've got a lot of work to do there. It's important that we manage our finances so that we recognize that every single individual is part of the solution, that the unions are part of the solution. They are not part of the problem, they are part of the solution. And every individual in this state has something to offer to the collective value, the collective good that we have as Vermonters. And our office is committed to that. I really want to thank Chris for all the work that we've done this past year. A new initiative we call ABLE, Achieving a Better Life Experience, to have financial independence for people in the disabled community and to be able to accumulate income for that independence. And 104,000 people in this state, according to the AARP, do not have employer-sponsored retirement benefits. We need to change that. We need to make sure that everyone has an opportunity for dignity in retirement. So for me, those are the fundamentals that bring us together. Those are the fundamentals that our office has, the other state officials that we work with, the governor's office, and we work together. Now, as Democrats, those are the values we share. Now, if I look around the room, we're going to have differences of opinions on different issues. That's okay. That's all right, because it adds to the conversation and it makes us better in terms of our solutions when we work together to work through those differences to find a solution. But the fundamental principle of equity and individual freedom from discrimination and empowerment, financial empowerment for all of our citizens is something that brings us all together. And I want to say thank you, every single one of you, for being part of that solution. We got work to do. Let's get it all done together. And one last piece on that. I hope to be your treasurer for a very, very long time to help with that. So thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Carter here. And for the last couple of years, I've been feeling the burn all over the great country, working on the Sanders campaign. But before I introduce our next speaker, I did want to give a shout out to a couple of the other folks in the room, especially a couple of folks who've got some really strong ties with the Vermont Democratic Party that I think are here today. Robert Dempsey, former executive director. And not sure if she made it, but Julia Barnes. Is Julia here? Excellent. And also a big shout out to Dottie Deans, Connor, all the leadership of the Vermont Democratic Party. You know, they've helped us navigate some very tricky waters out there, and I can't say enough good things about the leadership of the party. They're going to be shepherding our delegates to a fantastic convention in Philadelphia, and lots of gratitude to Dottie and her team. So, you know, one of the wonderful things about working on a national campaign is you get to meet all kinds of people from all walks of life. And one of the proudest individuals that I've had the good pleasure of working with is Nina Turner, Senator Nina Turner of Cleveland, Ohio. Now, there was one TV pundit who described Senator Turner as the Energizer Bunny. Well, I think that's not entirely accurate. While she most certainly has an insurmountable amount of energy, I would more accurately describe her as the Energizer Warrior. As a state senator in the state of Ohio, she tackled opponents of access to reproductive health. She brought voting rights and access to the front and center. On this campaign, she's made racial justice issues, criminal justice issues, and voting access a mainstream front and center issues. She's held Senator Sanders' feet to the fire. She's held the DNC's feet to the fire, and she's done an incredible job fighting for this campaign and fighting for the values of the Democratic Party. So, you know, when Bernie Sanders says this campaign is not about Bernie, it's about us, he's talking about the embodiment of individuals like Senator Nina Turner, who in her entire political career has made an effort to extend the invitation to bring new people into the party. As the engagement chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, she's gone above and beyond in making sure that this is a party that's inclusive, that does everything to bring people into the fold, and to work towards victory at the polls. So on that note, I'm very honored and very proud to introduce my sister, Senator Nina Turner.
Wow. Hello, Vermont. I want to thank Nick. I told him that was absolutely amazing. And all throughout this campaign, there are so many people who have worked on behalf of Senator Bernie Sanders, but Nick is right up there in my fave five. So thank you, Nick, so very much. He is. To the Vermont Democratic Party, I just want to thank you so much. My husband and I are certainly honored to join you this evening on behalf of Senator Bernie Sanders. I know that this is Sanders country, and you should be so proud. To Chairwoman Dottie, to Vice Chairman Tim, to Congressman Welsh, to Secretary Condos, who I was hoping to be a colleague with, in 2014 when I ran for Secretary of State. You know, it's just something gets to me about folks trying to take away access to the ballot box. Just messes with me. To Senator Leahy, I got to give a shout out to the Upper Valley young liberals who are in the room, to the young folks. But really to all of you who dare to dream big and who have hopes and dreams, I just want to say thank you, Vermont, because you should be so proud because you are the epicenter of the political revolution. I want to thank you for Senator Bernie Sanders. To Chris, Curtis, and the Curtis family, just thank you so much for having an incredible father who stood up when it was not popular to stand up, for our gay, lesbian, transgender community who stood up for folks who don't have a whole lot when it was not popular to do so. And we can't even top what Chris said. So everything I was going to say about his father, he said it all when he stood up here. But I just want to thank you. This award ceremony is dedicated to a man who didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk, and he used his power to make this world a better place. And I want to thank him for that. And what he has done here in Vermont, and the fact that you come every year to celebrate his life and his legacy, reminds me so much of Senator Bernie Sanders, and it made me think about something that President Teddy Roosevelt talked about or wrote when he talked about the man in the arena. And I just want to read a portion of that where he says that the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds. Chairman Curtis was somebody who strived to do the deeds. Senator Sanders is someone who strives to do the deeds. It is good to be a Democrat, but it's better to do democratic values. So this has been an incredible almost year for me to be able to travel this great nation and advocate on behalf of a man who decided that his love for this country was more important than his comfort and his convenience. Somebody who decided that in the greatest nation on the face of the earth, that somebody ought to talk about the working poor in this country, that somebody ought to talk about having universal health care in this country, that we cannot leave our sisters or our brothers behind, that somebody ought to talk about the debt that we are straddling our young folks with, young folks who graduate from colleges and universities with degrees in one hand and debt in the other, that somebody ought to talk about expanding and protecting access to Social Security, that somebody ought to talk about the fact that in this country we need to do a better job of ensuring that everybody has the absolute right to vote, and that it is wrong to block out anybody in this country. Senator Sanders is a doer of the deeds. So while I am a very proud, lifelong Democrat, I am now in the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. Because it is not enough to talk, we must do. And Vermont, you should be, I have no words to talk about how proud you should be to be able to travel this country and to see Senator Sanders in action. And I know that you have been with him, but he is loved all over this country. And I'm going to tell you something, if only the millennials could vote. If only the millennials could vote, we would have a different outcome in this election. But what I love about the young people is that they understand that the future of this country lies with us knowing that social justice and equality is the order of the day, and that there are far too many people in this country who are suffering. To all of my sisters and brothers, and I see the signs all over the hall, who are running to be in the elected ministry. And I call it a ministry because I just believe that people who run for elected office ought to care about the people they are running to serve. It is a ministry, and when we get the people's power, it is not our power, it is your power. It's your power. And my God, Senator Sanders and Dr. J, as I call Dr. Jane Sanders, Senator Sanders and Dr. J, and the entire Sanders family sacrificed a lot to be the family in the arena. And this country, Burlington, will never, ever, 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 ever be the same again, because Senator Sanders has forever changed the face of our nation because of his courage and determination to be a doer of the deeds. And so often on the campaign trail, people wanted to talk about the math. But can I say to you, the Democratic Party of Vermont, that this is not just about the math, but it is about the social studies. And the social study says this, that we can no longer afford, in the greatest nation on the face of this earth, to put more people in prison than we do educate. That we can no longer, as a country, sit back while 2.5 million folks languish in prison. Almost half of those folks are African Americans, and say that justice is served in the United States of America. And when Senator Sanders talked about the 5 violences against black and brown folks in this country, he was speaking to the heart and the soul of a nation that has to reconcile its values with its deeds. That no longer can we sit back and allow in the United States of America for women not to make dollar for dollar as a man. Ladies, we want our whole damn dollar. And when he talks about climate change, that for him, that is the biggest threat, not only in this country, but in this world. Because if we don't have fresh air and clean water, and if we don't have the courage enough to leave this nation, this Mother Earth, better off for generations yet unborn, then that is wrong. So Democrats, I want us to be doers of deeds. We have a rich tradition of service in this country, but somehow along the way, we have forgotten our value proposition. And Senator Sanders' boldness to go from state to state to state, bringing the message of hope, bringing the message of revolution. It took great courage, but also compassion. He is a man who is honest and consistent. All we have to do is roll the tape. And Senator Sanders has been saying the same thing for the last 40 years. And you know what, Vermont? The nation has finally caught up with your leader. He is bold in every single way. You know, when I got the phone call to represent, and I think it was Nick who called me, and I'm saying, the senator wants me to come to his backyard and speak on his behalf. A sister was sure enough honored. Can I just say that? To be in Burlington. To support a man who was the doer of the deed. I remember about 8 or 9 months ago, my husband, who was here with me, he said, baby, I think that there is another candidate for you. That he has the same righteous indignation about the uplift of people that you do. You ought to take a look at this senator. And I knew Vermont, I knew something about him, just as I know about Senator Leahy and other senators. You know, you pay attention to that stuff when you are in the elected ministry. But it wasn't until I dug a little deeper that I saw a man that you all are blessed to know and have in your presence, but somebody who has been living his values even from the young age of 21 years old, a young Jewish man at the University of Chicago who dared to stand up against that university's racism and discrimination against African American students. He has been a doer of the deeds all of his life. And who, like Chairman Curtis, when it was not popular to stand up for our gay sisters and brothers, stood up for them in the 70s, a doer of the deeds? And who in the 80s, when Reverend Jesse Jackson was running, was one of very few white elected officials who endorsed him, a doer of the deeds? And he took his message across this nation, and in a very short period of time, reminded folks that we can dream bigger, we can reach higher, that we do deserve in this country a nation that represents the interests of the 99. He is a doer of the deeds. And so when I juxtaposition all of the things that Senator Bernie Sanders has been fighting for all of his life, when I thought about my life, having a mother who died at the young age of 42 years old with her dreams deferred, being 22 years old, the oldest of 7 children, and my baby sister was 12, and I thought about my mother, how hard she fought and she worked, but she just didn't quite cut it. And that not only did she die at the age of 42 years old, she died on the system of welfare. She did not have a life insurance policy, and she had no money in the bank. When I had a flashback about this woman who loved all 7 of her children, but she fell short in life, like so many people do, who try and strive each and every day, who deserve and depend on people who are in the elected ministry, who care more about them than they care about the next election. When I juxtaposition my life story to what this man was fighting for, there was no doubt in my mind who I had to stand with, and that was Senator Bernie Sanders, and I have not regretted it a day. He is a doer of the deed. So to be privileged to be on national TV on a regular basis and debate folks about the doer of the deeds, I take it to him each and every single time. Because that's the kind of leader that you have in Vermont. And I want to thank you for sharing him with the rest of the world. Because he has changed this world. I don't know if you know Vermont, but people have traveled from all over the world. This is no exaggeration, and Nick can amen this, to support his candidacy. That is how much he is shaking this thing up, and you are blessed. So in closing, I want you to not only remember how blessed you are, that this revolution, our revolution, continues, that on this trail, Senator Sanders has never talked about himself. He always says us, we, that this is our revolution, that this is our time to reshape this nation in a way that changes things for generations, that we as Democrats can't just be, but we must do. And that it is time out for establishment politics. It is time out for people to rest safely when there is so much that we can do, Democrats. We are doers of the deeds. So 3 things that I want you to remember if you don't remember anything else I've had to say here tonight, besides the fact that Senator Bernie Sanders is all of that he is a doer of the deeds. Number 1, Vermont, I believe that the creator of this great universe has given us 2 hands, one to reach forward and one to reach back, lifting as we climb, that we are our sisters and our brothers' keepers, that nobody says that when they grow up they want to be poor. People fall short. And as the greatest nation on the face of the earth, it is our moral obligation to look out for each other, doers of the deed. Number 2, and most importantly, we can't ask other folks to do more for us than we are willing to do for ourselves. I think Brother Frederick Douglass put it this way. He said, you might not get everything that you work for, but you will work for everything that you get, doers of the deeds. But most importantly, in the words of my grandmother, Senator Leahy, was born in the South in 1913. She could not read or write, but sister, she could count her money. She kept her money in the Southern Ladies Bank and Trust with a handkerchief. Now, if there's any Southerners in the room, you know where that bank account is located, don't you, sister? You know, I used to ask my grandmother, because I just couldn't understand. I said, Grandma, why you keep your money there? Now, Grandma kept money on one side and a pistol on the other, but that's a whole nother story. She was a pistol packing mama. But I would say, Grandma, why you keep your money there? She said, these are the only 2 suckers I can trust. When I asked my grandmother, what does it take to be successful in life? She said, my dear granddaughter, all you need are the 3 bones. The wishbone, the jawbone, and the backbone. She said the wishbone will keep you hoping and praying, because hope is the motivator, but the dream is the driver. The reason why we do what we do each and every day, the reason why you are here tonight to celebrate the life and legacy of a man who gave all that he could for people who needed somebody to give them voice. The reason why you are here tonight and you celebrate the essence of another man who gave everything, who stepped in the arena, is because we do believe that tomorrow will be better than today. She said the jawbone, though, will give you courage to lift your voice and speak truth to power. My grandmother used to say that it should matter that you are in the room. We got far too many folks, sisters and brothers, who just comfortable with being in the room, but they're not going to do a daggone thing when they get there. They all obsessed with having a title, but they don't understand that titles are good, but purpose is better, and all of us can live our purpose. You don't have to have a fancy title to do what is right. But she said, the most important bone of them all, Vermonters, the supercalifragilistic expialidocious bone, is the backbone, because the backbone will keep you standing through all of your trials and your tribulations. It was the backbone that had the colonists say to Great Britain, we out of here, right? And even though they weren't perfect at the time, that's a whole nother story, they had the courage to say, we're not doing this anymore. It was the backbone that gave African Americans in this country and their white allies in this country to say that we will abolish slavery. It was the backbone that gave women the right to vote. It was the backbone that stood up against DOMA. It was the backbone. That is the most important bone of them all. Because we will go through trials and tribulations, but we can't have a testimony without a test. And Democrats, we are being tested about whether or not we got courage enough, sympathy enough, empathy enough, oomph enough, chutzpah enough to do what is right, when it is right, no matter what the cost is to us as individuals. So Democrats, we must be doers and not just be. Senator Bernie Sanders is the embodiment of all that is right in this nation, and as far as we can go in this nation, a visionary, and he is your guy. And sometimes we take for granted the people who are the closest to us. But in the spirit of Helen Keller, when she said one must never consent to creep when they feel the urge to soar, from the youngest person in this room to the most seasoned person in this room, I hope you all feel the urge to soar. And Democrats, let's go out there and be doers. Take this nation by storm. Get out of our comfort zone and never fear standing up when it is right. Because I believe that the creator of this universe works through people. And we are those people. So God bless you, Vermont. God bless Senator Sanders and Dr. J. And you all are incredible. Thank you. Let me get the mic back up here where it belongs. Loving y'all, Vermont.
You were awesome. Oh, God. We need you as a secretary. Wow. And I got to follow that? I want to thank Nina, and I want to say, Nina, we really need you as a colleague in the Secretaries of State. Before I get to our gubernatorial candidates, I'd just like to take a minute to thank you all for your support of the Democratic Party, of all of us candidates, but I also want to thank especially the legislature. And the reason I want to thank the legislature is they've had a lot of vision the last probably 6 years. More than that, actually. When I served, there was even more vision. But in any case, what I do want to say is while many states across this country, and unfortunately Nina's state is one, there's a lot of suppression of the vote going on. We got states that are falling all over themselves trying to figure out different ways that they can suppress that vote. But here in Vermont, we've moved in the other direction. We have moved forward with a progressive agenda to actually expand our electorate. And just to give you a couple of quick examples, we have 45 days of early voting. By the way, it all starts next Friday. 17-year-olds in Vermont are allowed to vote in primaries if they turn 18 by the general election. My office instituted online voter registration last fall. We worked with the legislature to pass same-day voter registration, which will not take effect until 2017. And lastly, an item that I'm really proud of, and my colleague who was Secretary of State at the time in Oregon, and then at the meeting that she was telling us about automatic voter registration, her state was the first. She was Secretary of State Kate Brown. She got the phone call while we were at dinner in Washington from the governor of Oregon telling her, I think you better come home, I'm about to resign. And she became governor 2 days later. Vermont became the 4th state in the country to pass automatic voter registration. We have 3 fantastic gubernatorial candidates. All 3 are friends of mine. All 3 I've worked with in various capacities. The first one, these are in alphabetical order. The first one is Matt Dunn. Matt Matt is a lifelong Vermonter who grew up in the same Heartland farmhouse where he and his wife Sarah currently are raising their 3 children. Matt was first elected to the State House at age 22, and after 7 years was appointed by President Clinton to lead AmeriCorps Vista, a 6,000-person corps, providing targeted programming to empower people out of poverty. Most recently, he spent the last 8 years at Google, working from a White River Junction office, overseeing the investment of millions of dollars in affordable housing nationwide. Throughout his career, Matt has fought to ensure justice for all, equal opportunity across incomes, races, and genders, and for a progressive future in Vermont. Welcome to Matt Dunn. Where is he?
So in the interesting act to follow department, I am delighted to be here. Thank you, Dottie. Congratulations to the award winners. And Christopher, wherever you are, thank you for your unbelievable commitment and your moving comments. And at the end of a heartbreaking week, where my soul literally aches, damn, is it good to be in a room full of Democrats in the state of Vermont. And if the nation didn't need Vermont before this week, let me tell you, the nation really needs Vermont now. We were and will continue to be the conscience of our country. We were the first to ban slavery, and we were the first to stand up to Joe McCarthy. And as Donald Trump preys on America's worst fears, we will be the state that says clearly to him that what makes America great is not the walls that we build, is not the division and the prisons. What makes America great is our uncompromising commitment that every single individual in this world is created equal. And what I love about this, about being a Democrat, what I love about being a Vermont Democrat, is that we were the first to declare loudly and clearly that everyone had equal rights to marriage and to give equality to our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. And what we see is when Vermont leads, the nation follows. And just look at us now. Bernie Sanders is bringing our values, Vermont values, to the rest of the country. And he is changing politics forever. But what Bernie will tell you is that it is not a moment that's about one person running for president, that it's a movement. It's a movement that started here in Vermont and must continue here in Vermont. Bernie's fight is our fight, and we must stand for it. And when I go around this state, what I am hearing is that Vermonters are ready. Vermonters are ready to declare, finally and for all, that health care is a human right and continue us on the path to universal health care. Vermonters are ready to move us to a $15 minimum wage and ensure that no one works 40 hours a week and is still in poverty. Vermonters are ready to invest in education and not incarceration and to finally ban the practice of corporate prisons. Vermonters are ready, they are finally ready for universal background checks on every firearm purchase and closing the loophole on straw purchases. And Vermonters are ready, they are past ready, to guarantee equal pay for equal work for every man and woman in this state and ensure that we have paid family leave. But I want to be very clear with you here tonight, Democrats. If Phil Scott is elected governor, this window closes. All of our progress will stop. And the people who have gotten excited about this movement at this moment will go back to being cynical and feel that their voices don't matter anymore. This is an important moment for all of us. And the pundits will tell you, Phil's got this all wrapped up. But I'm here to tell you, I am ready to beat Phil Scott. You are ready to beat Phil Scott. We are ready to beat Phil Scott. And it is incredibly important that we do that, because when Democrats lead Vermont, Vermont leads the country. And we must continue down that path. Now, David Curtis was an incredible influence for me. And I miss him a lot. And he demonstrated by his actions what it meant to be bold and progressive and to stand up for others. And at this moment in time, when I'm hearing the language of hate from Donald Trump and the horrific tragedy in Orlando, I miss him more than ever. I remember his smile and the strength in his voice when he paved the way for a woman's right to choose and ultimately for us to be able to bring marriage equality to our state and then the rest of the country. And just as we led the nation then, David would demand that we lead again, because that is the role that we must play. And it is what it means to be a Vermont Democrat. When Vermont leads, the nation follows. Together, we can do this. Thank you.
Next up is Peter Galbraith. During his career as a diplomat and an elected official, Peter has stood up for the underdog, even when it meant challenging conventional wisdom. A lifelong Townsend resident, Peter has also served with the United Nations in East Timor and Afghanistan. As a U.S. Senate staffer, Peter uncovered and helped stop Saddam Hussein's genocide against the Kurds. In 1993, he was appointed as the first U.S. ambassador to Croatia, where he worked to negotiate the peace agreement that ended the Croatian War. During his 2 terms as a state senator representing Windham County, Peter pushed for many progressive causes, including introducing a bill to pay for single-payer health care. He championed legislation to ban corporate contributions in Vermont and to limit special interest tax breaks and corporate subsidies. Please welcome Peter Galbraith.
Thank you, Jim, for that very warm introduction. I think it came from my Wikipedia page. First, let me begin by congratulating the award winners and by saying how wonderful it is to be here with our amazing congressional delegation. You know, Senator Leahy, I just calculated between the general elections and the primaries, I voted for you 14 times. I think there are 2 more to go this year, and I don't know how many more, but 14 and counting. And Peter, if you're here, you're catching up, but I guess that's a function of our 2-year terms. I'm delighted to be here speaking not just as your possible standard bearer, but Dottie as your predecessor as a Democratic state chair. The Democratic Party is the oldest political party in the world, still in existence. And we can ask, why are we still here when other parties have come and gone? We began as the party of the underdog, and there are still a lot of underdogs around. When I was chair of the Democratic Party in the 1970s, Vermont was a Republican state, and the Democrats, we were the insurgents. Today, we are the party of government, but we cannot let this change our party. Democratic policies are good for business, but we cannot be the party of big business. So I am running for governor to return the Vermont Democratic Party to its progressive roots. And this means raising the minimum wage to $15 by 2021. Our Republican friends like to talk about affordability, but for whom is Vermont not affordable? It's not affordable. It's perfectly affordable for those at the top. It's not affordable for those at the bottom of the income spectrum. And a $15 minimum wage is a 50% pay raise, and it will do more than anything else to make Vermont affordable for those who struggle the most. We can provide 4 years free tuition to all Vermont high school graduates at the Vermont state colleges so that young Vermonters do not start their lives, their working lives, being unable to buy a house or even not being able to afford to start a family. And we can pay for this. We can pay for 4 years free tuition by eliminating special interest tax deductions, and I'll announce how we can do this next week, but we can eliminate special interest tax deductions that provide no benefit to working Vermonters and that most of you don't even know exists. We can return to our progressive roots by standing up to the corporate interests. And who is the biggest corporate interest of them all? It's the National Rifle Association, which masquerades as an organization of gun owners. So let's go ahead in the state of Vermont and let's outlaw the sale of assault rifles. We should ban corporate campaign contributions that corrupt our politics. You know, Vermont allows these contributions which have been banned under federal law since 1907. Now, I took this on in the Senate, and I stand here as the only candidate for governor who's never accepted them. I didn't make myself popular. I didn't succeed, although I forced a couple of votes. One of them went my way, and this third reading it went the other way. But it was the right thing to do, and we can send a message. You know, in 2017, Vermont should catch up with what the federal government did in 1907, catch up even with the state of Texas. And we need to end an economic development policy of taxpayer giveaways to large corporations at the expense of ordinary Vermonters. I'll cite one example. Over recent years, Vermont has given $10 million, no strings attached, to Green Mountain Coffee Roasters. The company thanked Vermont taxpayers by moving its coffee buying business to Switzerland to escape U.S. taxes. This kind of corporate subsidy is a sucker's game that taxpayers lose at. So, Vermont Democrats, let's return to our insurgent roots. We should not be the ones sending our tax dollars to large corporations. We should not be the party that creates special interest tax breaks. And we should not be the party which takes more corporate money than the Republicans. Let us resume the Democratic fight for economic justice. As Franklin Delano Roosevelt said at his second inaugural, the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next up is Sue Minter. Sue lives in Waterbury, and she's spent her entire adult life throwing herself into her family, her community, and into public service. Representing Waterbury, Sue was elected to the Vermont House 4 times. During Sue's fourth term, she was appointed as Deputy Secretary of Transportation, one of the largest state agencies. She later became the Secretary of Transportation. After Vermont was devastated during Tropical Storm Irene, Sue helped oversee the rebuilding of over 500 miles of damaged roads and the repair and replacement of more than 100 bridges within 4 months. Once the final piece of road opened, Sue began her service as the Irene Recovery Officer, where she worked directly with residents, state agencies, and local businesses to rebuild homes, communities, and get our state back on its feet. And Sue was a recipient of the Curtis Award last year. Welcome, Sue Minter.
Good evening, everybody, or whoever's left. It's great to be here with you all. I want to just say that I am honored to be here with all of you tonight. I want to congratulate the recipients of the Curtis Awards. Thank you to Chris Curtis and his extended family for the inspiration he continues to give us. I want to say thank you, Dottie Deans and her team. And thank you all to what you do to keep our Vermont Democratic Party strong. I will tell you, it is an extraordinary privilege to be running for governor, to be traveling the state and talking with so many Vermonters about our challenges and our opportunities. And I got to tell you that I am sick and tired of hearing the Republicans talk about what a terrible place this is to live and have a business. That's not the narrative that I hear. And it's not what my campaign is about. My campaign is about a very different message. It's a message of hope. Because I know that we can create economic opportunity by revitalizing our communities and keeping young Vermonters here. We can make sure that Vermonters have access to clean water and to a strong green economy to fight climate change. And we must build ladders out of poverty, which is why I have announced my plan for 2 years of tuition-free college at Vermont Community College and Vermont Technical College. That is my Vermont promise. But tonight, I want to focus on a different story. And I have to tell you how proud I am to be hearing tonight that the Vermont Democratic Party is standing strong for gun safety. And thank you. Thank you so much to our congressional delegation for leading. And we know how challenging it is in Washington to address issues like gun safety, which is why we need a strong governor in the state of Vermont who will not back down. You know, it's hard for me to stand here tonight and not remember just 1 year ago the moving speech of Senator Leahy talking about the massacre in a church in Charleston. But it hasn't stopped. Remember Planned Parenthood in Colorado. And that same week, San Bernardino, California. And now we grieve for Orlando. And our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. We grieve and we stand strong with the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community here in Vermont and across this country. We grieve for others, but we must know that here in Vermont, we are not immune to gun violence. Remember Lara Sobel. And she is not alone. Gun violence happens in Vermont, but it is often behind closed doors. Domestic violence causes most homicides in Vermont, and half of those homicides are with guns. In 2013, Vermont had the 8th highest rate of domestic homicides in this country. The majority of those were with guns. And that's why I am proud to stand up to support background checks on all gun sales and a ban on military assault weapons. Thank you. And let's remember why. Because background checks work. Because in states where there are background checks on handguns, there is 46% fewer women are shot to death by their intimate partners. We cannot leave women alone behind closed doors. And I believe that it is time that we have a state and a country where women are safe in their homes, where people can feel safe in their communities regardless of their religion, their race, their gender identity, or who they love. And that's why, as your next governor, I will stand for civil rights, for economic justice, and for economic opportunity. I will stand strong for a woman's right to choose without exception. I will stand strong for equal pay, and I will not back down for the fight for common sense gun safety. I have a backbone. And you can count on me. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for being so patient. I know we're running a little bit late, but you really are in for a treat. R.T. Ryback, since I started as a chair in the VDP and the vice chair, I was vice chair and then chair, I got to go to some of these meetings at the DNC, and you start sort of zeroing in on the people and the representatives and the people that are involved with the whole country. R.T. at the time was the mayor of Minneapolis. He has a sparkle, he is authentic, and he cares so deeply. I'm going to bring him up. I've got a whole laundry list of things that I could say to compliment him, but he can do it himself. R.T. Ryback.
Dottie Dean, ladies and gentlemen, who is one of the great, thank you, Dottie. We so appreciate it, and it's great to be here with you. And it's great to be here with Mayor Clavell, who is one of my real partners. And I have to say, I really could vote for governor 3 times here. And TJ, I'm going to throw one in for you for AG too. You have amazing candidates here. But I do have to say it's an incredible honor to be able to sit next to one of my true heroes, which is Senator Leahy, who is absolutely the conscience of the Senate. And there have been time and time again. Thank you. There have been so many times when there is absolute craziness happening in Washington and the amazing voice of Senator Leahy comes forward again. And I have to tell you, that night when that filibuster was going on, I was so incredibly proud. But there was one question that came in my mind. I thought, where in the world did Senator Leahy learn to talk that long? But now I've been to a Curtis dinner. So I just want to thank you all and tell you I appreciate it very much. And I am not going to talk very long, okay? What I want to do, though, is I want to talk to you very, very briefly about a United States senator who changed the shape of politics. And it wasn't because he was safe. In fact, he scared a lot of people. There was all that wild, hot rhetoric, the wild hair all over the place. You know what I'm talking about? What really made people uncomfortable is when he began to speak about income inequality. And he made the comfortable very, very uncomfortable. And that senator who changed the shape of politics in the United States was named Paul Wellstone. He was my senator. And when Paul Wellstone died, a little bit of all of us, and absolutely a little bit of me, died right along with him. But Paul Wellstone, as you can see by those of you who acknowledged him tonight, is still very much alive. He is very much with us, because the loss of Paul Wellstone was only the beginning of Paul Wellstone's legacy. Those who felt that loss deeply picked up the mantle. And what they did is they formed Wellstone Action, which now has trained hundreds and hundreds of political activists, there you are, all over this country. And the loss of Paul Wellstone was only the beginning. And I want to talk to you very briefly about a United States senator who changed the course of politics. And he had a very young following. And they got delegates, but they went to the convention and they didn't have quite enough. And his supporters were heartbroken. But he didn't give up. What he did is he picked up the mantle of that, and for the next few years he led a reform movement in the Democratic Party. And 4 years later, came back with a far more Democratic Party, and he was the party nominee. And that man was George McGovern. And his loss was a beginning. And I want to tell you about a politician from Vermont who changed the course of politics. And people didn't give him a chance because he started that campaign well behind all the other candidates with the big money interests. But he said, I'm going to do it a different way. And he started a grassroots fundraising effort that raised millions of dollars and activated people all over the country. And that politician from Vermont who changed the course of politics was named Howard Dean. So Paul Wellstone, George McGovern, Howard Dean, each of them in their own way changed politics. But this has been a long night. I'm not here to give you a history lesson or to put them on the Mount Rushmore of progressive politics. I raised their names tonight for a very specific reason, because the echoes of their campaign have also echoed through the absolute roar of reform that we have heard in the Democratic Party that has been the Bernie Sanders campaign. And I want to say, even more important, they remind us that politics is a funny thing. Success and failure does not come conveniently within an electoral cycle. And if we are what I believe we are in this room, committed people who believe deeply in action, not just for an election, but to understand that winning is about winning for people, then you recognize that what started here in the Bernie Sanders campaign means we can never go back. You have changed the course of history, and it never would have happened if it wasn't for the people of Burlington, Vermont, who elected Mayor Sanders, and the people of this state. And for that, I just want to say thank you, Vermont. Thank you. But I also want to be very clear. Paul Wellstone, George McGovern, the others that you talked about, Howard Dean, and so many more, didn't have a lasting legacy simply because they expected people to Google progressive politics. What they did is there was a very, very intentional attempt to stand back and take the lessons learned and make sure that we made change permanent. Stop and think about 1 year ago today when the presidential campaign was beginning and almost no one was talking about income inequality. They sure the heck are today, not just at the presidential campaign, but in congressional campaigns all over the country. That's your work, Sanders campaign. That's your work, Vermont. And for that, I want to say thank you. And if you stand back and you look, that a year ago, people said that the only way to measure the success of a presidential candidate was to measure the size of their PAC. That's not what they're talking about today, because the candidate with the most money in this campaign was the one who didn't even have a super PAC. That's your work, Sanders campaign. That is your work, Vermont, and I just want to thank you for that. And a year ago today, people were saying that young people had given up on politics. They weren't going to show up. Well, the fact of the matter is, you just had to show them a candidate like Bernie Sanders who brought those values and who brought that ethic and who brought that fire. And young people are absolutely not only the core of the Sanders campaign, but I am absolutely clear they will be at the heart of the Democratic Party and social justice movements for a generation to come. That is your work. Thank you, Sanders campaign, and thank you, Vermont. So we do have a lot of work to do. But we also need to remember there is another thing that was raised in the Sanders campaign. It was the fact that we also have to change the way we choose politics and choose our political leaders. Now, I stand here as the vice chairman of the Democratic National Committee. And I will defend a lot of the work of the Democratic National Committee, but not all of it. But not all of it. And if you think about what Vermont taught the United States of America, remember that nobody was begging Howard Dean from the Washington establishment to become chair of the Democratic National Committee. He led a grassroots effort, and a grassroots political presidential campaign is a wonderful way to reform an elected institution. The Democratic Party is an elected institution, and if you believe there needs to be change within that party, then you should go forward and be part of it and know there are willing partners. The DNC is not the DWS, and it is not the RT. It is YOU. And if you lead a reform movement to open up the wings of the party, I am absolutely there, right with you, and that's exactly what I think needs to be done in this country. And I want to raise one other name. I want to raise one other name with these great names we've put together, and that name is Hillary Clinton. And I raised that name in a room full of people who didn't support her, and I don't stand here as a person who began as a true believer. I was the first mayor in the country to endorse Barack Obama, and frankly, 8 years ago, I spent a lot of time trying to convince people not to vote for Hillary Clinton. But I paid a lot of attention to what happened next. I saw her pick up from a losing campaign, and like some of those other people with a great legacy, choose to join her opponent, become the Secretary of State, and make our country stronger. I reassessed her whole future and past. I looked at the fact that a student who began as a reform student who took on the establishment, stayed focused on the issues of people most in need, especially children, decade after decade, took on health care when she lost, picked up the mantle, and moved forward and worked on children's health. I have remained neutral in this campaign, and I will continue to do that, because I believe that's what people at the Democratic National Committee should be doing. But I do want to say, I am incredibly proud of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton for proving we're not what the Republican Party is. We can have a hot debate in this party. We can talk about the issues. We can raise these things forward. And we are people who stand for our values. So I've told you names of some Democrats I think we should admire, names that we've known. But when you really stop and think about what it means to be a Democrat, it's not about the names we have known. We are the greatest political party in the history of the world. The world has never heard of a better political party than the Democratic Party because we stand for those who are never heard. We stand for the woman raising a single family who now has health care. Thank you, Obamacare. We stand for the college student who comes out of a future and is under crashing debt and needs us to stand forward. We stand for the voter, the African American standing in line who has been disenfranchised. That is our person. And we stand for the gay couple who spent years in hiding. And finally, because of the Democratic Party led by Vermont, they finally have the right to marry. But we also know that we must stand with them as they see Orlando and ask themselves, can we go out in public and still hold hands? Yes, you can, because you have the Democratic Party. And when you stop and think about what we stand for, I want you to think of the immigrants standing in the shadows today, who prays at night that this will be the country of the values of the Statue of Liberty and not Donald Trump's wall. That's what it means to be a Democrat. That is who we are. And so here at the end of a very long campaign, and frankly a very long night as well, I just want to say to you this, that we have come through a campaign that has been tough and rigorous, but the fact of the matter is what you started right here is only beginning. You have reshaped politics, you have re-energized this party, and it is only just beginning. And with that, one more time, I want to say thank you, Vermont.
All right, thank you so much, R.T. Ryback. And I think we have a couple of his books outside, so I'm looking forward to reading it. My name's Connor Casey. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Democratic Party. Most importantly, I'm the last speaker tonight, so I thought it would be appropriate, just hearing all the speakers. I only met him one time, but the former Vermont Speaker of the House, Ralph Wright, used to say, all politics is personal, and I take that to the bank. For those of us who work in politics, this isn't just a job. For those of us who volunteer in politics, this isn't just a hobby. And I'd like Chris Curtis to stand up just for a moment again right now. If you don't mind standing up, Chris. Chris Curtis pushes us all to be better Democrats. Sometimes we need our ass kicked, and Chris does it, and his dad did it before him. And we're going to continue to doing it because 2016 is an unprecedented year in Vermont politics. Not since 1968 have we had the same number of open seats, and the stakes have never been higher. Democratic policies have gotten us a long way. We're in the lowest in the country as far as the unemployment rate, the bottom three. Lowest in the uninsured rate. It was Democratic policies that brought this state back from the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. And it was Democratic policies that brought us back from one of the worst natural disasters we've seen in Tropical Storm Irene. So we have a lot to be proud of. But they're coming for us. They're coming for us in 2016. They're putting a lot of money into the state, and they're targeting a lot of races. I remember I was working for Senator Ted Kennedy, driving him around one time. And he said, Connor, you're from Vermont. Why are you working for me? You got the best senator already, and Senator Patrick Leahy back in 2004. I remember Congressman Welsh when he was pro tem. And when he was elected congressman, I was working for the State Employees Union, and he'd come to our meetings, and it would be a bunch of truck drivers in AOT. He'd walk around and pour coffee for each of them. They'd never expect their congressman to do that. And we were so proud. Our delegation, and we're so proud of Senator Bernie Sanders, who's representing us all on the national level so well. They're all a shining beacon in otherwise a very dark place in Washington, D.C. So are we going to let them take out our congressional delegation? No, we're not. We've got majorities in the House and the Senate, and with those majorities, we overrode Governor Douglas's veto of marriage equality. We overrode a budget veto that would have gutted state services and left us all in a state of disrepair. So are we going to let the Republicans take back the majorities in the House and the Senate? No, we're not. In the governor's race, we're running against someone who campaigned against civil unions when he first ran for Senate. He voted against a 25-cent increase to a $7 minimum wage. He opposed paid sick days for working families. And just a couple weeks ago, he supported right-to-work laws that would dismantle collective bargaining rights for labor unions. If he's governor, he's just going to keep driving around that track. But we've got 29 agencies, departments, and commissions at stake with the executive branch of state government, which is open. Are we going to let this guy take it away from us? No! I'm so proud to be a Democrat tonight. I'm so proud to be here with all of you. I want to thank everybody so much, all the Curtis Award winners, all the volunteers, everybody who spent money to come here. We obviously need your money, but we need your boots on the ground even more. So thanks again. Thanks to the staff who put this together. Nikki Celine led the charge there. Thank you all our great candidates, all our great elected officials. Everybody drive safe, and let's take him out, guys. Have a good night.